Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning, Charles Thomas, former ABC7 political reporter.
Good morning.
We talked a little bit about it earlier, but I want to go back to another comment that President, again, Trump made at the National Prayer Breakfast yesterday. It's interesting because Newt Gingrich has said this about Trump, about the impact of the assassination attempt on him. And he addressed it yesterday.
But honestly, it changed something in me. I feel even stronger. I believed in God, but I feel much more strongly about it. Something happened. So, thank you.
Gingrich has said the same thing, that that failed assassination attempt changed him, where he almost lost his life, and you see it in his demeanor. He is more calm. He is, more composed. He seems to be more at peace. Do you pick up on that at all?
Yeah, because watching it buttressed my faith. Because I saw what happened to him, and I saw that it took God to save him at that point, and he did. And again, it makes believers believe, and that what his purpose is.
Yeah, it's not unheard of for a near-death experience to have a profound impact on somebody, and to lead them in the direction of faith or strengthen the faith that they possess in their lives. So it's just interesting, and it was interesting that he addressed that. J.D. Vance, let's talk a little bit about the hierarchy of love, Charles. Interestingly, that was the name of my high school Air Supply tribute band.
The hierarchy of love.
Yeah, hierarchy of love. We used to get rave reviews for our rendition of "All Out of Love." Anyway, J.D. Vance was on with Hannity the other day, and he got in some hot water. No, he didn't say childless cat ladies, but he did talk about the hierarchy of love, essentially. And the comments you're about to hear were received by people like the folks at Christianity Today as, nativist and insensitive and abiblical.
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership, and President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
What is President Xi doing? What is Vladimir Putin
He's looking after the Chinese. Putin is looking after the Russians. They're entitled to do that. Thank God we now have an American president who's looking after the citizens of his own country.
I wouldn't exactly say Xi and Putin are looking after their citizens, but you take his point.
You take his point, but I think family first. I think that is part of the Christian ethic. Family first. And then you care about your neighbor, you care about your country, you care about the world, but family first. And we've gotten away from that.
That's not very global citizen of you, Charles.
I know, but I think it's Christian. Family first.
Well, let's get some perspective on this. He wrote about it. Rusty Reno is the editor at First Things, firstthings.com. Rusty, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you guys.
So you wrote about J.D. Vance's comments, and you relied on some musings from Thomas Aquinas to conclude that, J.D. Vance pretty much has it right.
Yeah, St. Thomas addresses exactly the question whether we ought to love one neighbor more than another, and that's what Vance was driving at, that we ought to love our children more than our neighbors' children more than children in California, and the children of the country more than all the children in the world, so to speak. And St. Thomas goes at it by saying that, we should love more those to whom we have greater duties and responsibilities. And so the parent has a greater responsibility to his own children than to other people's children. And that's, I think, the intuition that he was correctly spelling out on that Meet the Press show.
Right, but of course this all gets. For some, this all has to be filtered through the political prism, and you have many who suggested that love your neighbor as yourself, and it's non-specific, and we're supposed to so we have to think about this. It's callous to talk about a hierarchy of concern. We have the same concern for our fellow man because we're all human beings, and have a buy a Coke and share the world and all that.
Yeah. So St. Thomas says that we have the love is universal in the sense that we will the good of all people. It's just that both the degree of responsibility and our means to help others varies according to how close people are to us. So, the Good Samaritan in the parable of the Good Samaritan, he's not, a voter in a distant land, rather he's on the road and he comes upon, the man wounded by the robbers. So he's there and he has the means to help. And so, Vance, and I certainly would agree with him, he's not saying that the United States doesn't have duties and responsibilities to the larger world, but those duties and responsibilities come after we discharge our responsibility to each other as fellow citizens.
How do you react when somebody who presents themselves as a Christian argues things like no one is illegal?
I think in this instance, what's happening is that the Christian is confusing the nation with the church. Everyone is welcome. People who come and ask to be baptized, you don't check their citizenship card.
Right.
Because the church is a universal institution. The call of Christ is to all nations. But a nation, the United States of America, Great Britain, Mexico, these are not churches. These are natural entities. These are societies God wills, after the Tower of Babel, that we organize ourselves as nations, and that in that context, we have both a right and, moreover, a duty to protect the integrity of our nation, of our people. And so I just think it's a kind of classic mistake that sometimes we make it on the right. We say United States, we treat United States as if it was the chosen nation, and that's no. The church is the new Israel, not the United States of America. And I think that there's a kind of missionary zeal to Americanize the whole world that was part of the globalist project. I think was a theological mistake. The United States of America is not God's instrument for the unification of all people. The Church of Christ is that instrument. And then progressives make the same mistake by applying the responsibilities, duties, and nature of the church to the United States. It's a classic mistake. We've been making it. I think the Puritans in Boston often spoke as if their political community and the church were one and the same. And I think progressivism descends often from that Puritan legacy and makes exactly the same mistake.
Trump yesterday at the prayer breakfast also talked about the need to make religion more important in our lives in America, and that in so doing, people who disagree will be able to break bread together again and otherwise be more, kind to one another, basically. And I just, I'm curious in your take on this, because we Charles and I were talking a bit earlier in the show. If you watch the first 2 weeks of the first 3 weeks, I guess now, of the Trump administration, regardless of the particular policy area, I mean, everything he's doing, it seems to me, comes from sort of a cultural foundation. That he has a particular view on what has weakened American culture, and he is going to act in furtherance, whether it is with respect to immigration policy or tax policy, the full range. He is going to act in furtherance of a particular cultural view he has about American and what its culture should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with him. I mean, I'm grateful that he recognizes that encouraging the religious life of the American people is an integral element of renewing our national project. And there are many reasons for that. I mean, partly religious faith is a galvanizing thing. And I think one of the reasons people swung in his direction in the last election is that they feel that we're living in a kind of dispirited, I think the Biden administration, it kind of created a dispirited, rudderless, aimless feeling. And, religious faith galvanizes us, it gets us up and says we got to do God's will. And I think that that's an important part. And then secondly, as he said, and as you said, Dan, the religious faith relativizes our political judgments, and it guards us against making politics into our religion. And one of the perversions of the whole woke revolution was its kind of religious fervor. And I think it made it intolerant and punitive. Whereas, my religious faith, our religious faith allows us to say, maybe we're mistaken in our political judgments about what's best for the future of the country. And we're able to recognize that we live under the judgment of God. And that instills a very helpful degree of humility.
Are we still a Judeo-Christian country?
Oh, I would say yes. In cultural inheritance, certainly. And look, this whole anxiety about the treatment of illegal migrants in our country is only plausible in a Christian culture. And as we're having a conversation here, how do we properly understand Jesus' commandment to love your neighbor as yourself? And we think progressives have a mistaken interpretation of that. But the fact that we're having this kind of discussion is a pretty strong indication that Christianity still provides the moral horizon for American society. So in that regard, I don't think we're a post-Christian nation. I think we've lost our moorings to the church, and that often allows that Christian inheritance to become distorted or misinterpreted. But I think it's still Christianity is still the moral horizon.
Rusty Reno is the
progressivism. The woke progressivism is really, again, only really intelligible. It's not taking hold in China. It took hold in the West because of our Christian. It's a Christian heresy, is what I would say.
Rusty Reno, editor at firstthings.com. Rusty, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Great to be on the show. Thanks.
And Rusty joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Family life is a crazy adventure filled with love and laughter, but it can also be demanding with work schedules, after-school activities,